I'd like to call the Joint Special School Building Committee to order. It's Thursday, January 24th, 2019. We're in the Nashua High School North Lecture Hall, and it is 7:02 p.m. Mr. Garino is going to be late. Sean, do you have the book? So could you do the prayer and the attendance roll call? And so we will start with the prayer. And Alderman Jetty, would you lead us in the pledge right after that?
Right, I don't have a copy, so.
You're in trouble.
Almighty God, we have the high honor and serious duty to manage the educational affairs of our beloved city. Fill us, O God, with a spirit of unity and understanding which enables us to face our multiple problems with a serene mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will always be for the betterment and greater happiness of all our fellow citizens. So help us God. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clock. Yeah. Okay. So, could your clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Dowd.
Present.
Alderwoman Wilshire. Here. Alderwoman Melisa-Golia. Present. Alderman Jetty.
Here.
Alderwoman Klee.
Here.
Ms. Oden. Mr. Garino. Ms. Raymond.
Here.
Mr. Mosier.
Yep, here.
Ms. Porter.
Here.
And we do have a quorum.
Okay, I had Mrs. Oden is out, not going to be here this evening for personal reasons, and she got in touch with me earlier today. And Mr. Garino will be a couple minutes late, so he should be coming in at any time. Okay. If there are no objections, we'll waive the reading of the minutes of the meetings of Wednesday, November 28th, and Thursday, November 28th, and place them on file. Thanks. Remarks by Chairman. Thank you all for coming out on such a rainy evening. And tonight we're going to be giving a status of where we are with Phase 1 of the project, and hopefully it'll be informative. School administration, any remarks? Nope. There's no construction project committee. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the FMS roofing invoices.
Yes, so this will be these are the last invoices for this project, closing it out. You have attached in your package the financial report. It was done under budget. We actually got some additional work done at the end that was approved by this committee. And we have a remaining balance of $8,277. And there are two invoices, both from Advanced Roof Management Associates, Inc., one for $10,626. That was from their original proposal, and one for $1,900, which was for the additional work that we had done, and they monitored that for us.
Okay.
And request that we approve those.
And I hear a motion to approve the invoice to Advanced Roof Management in the amount of $12,526.
So moved.
Okay, move twice. The motion on the floor is to approve the invoice for A&M Roofing Services for the Fairground Middle School roofing project at the amount of $12,526. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, before we get into the presentation, just want to say that things are moving along, and I think it's part of the presentation, but last night the additional $50,000 was approved, so we have $300,000 for Phase 1. Which should be enough for both contractors and the other subcontractors that we will need once the ground thaws or comes under with less water on it or something, but anyway. So,
Yay.
okay. Which glasses to use?
Did you say you had hard copies?
What?
Did-
Oh, yes, hard copies.
Thank you.
You wanna
Rick, if you
pass
want
them?
me 3, I'll bring them over. Oh,
Oh, where are we?
here.
Just in nick of time. Just right on.
Yeah, it's an Heather's gonna need to. There's another one over here too, an extra one.
No, I just gave it to these gentlemen.
Oh. Okay, so the middle school project is moving right. Can you make that full presentation or? There you go. All right, next slide. Okay, we had a contractor planning session between the two contractors and myself and Sean, where we got the copies of the contracts to be looked at. And we talked about what we talked about tonight at the Joint Special School Building Committee, and then they first look at a schedule that everyone will get a copy of. What I asked them to do is come up with a high-level schedule that's easier to read rather than a full schedule that gets down to the nature of every detail. Okay. So the contracts with Harvey Construction, to summarize what it says there, the contract has been signed, was reviewed by Attorney Bolton, and it's gone back and forth between Attorney Bolton and Harvey, and I was given the authorization to sign it today. I signed it, and Sean has a copy, and Harvey has a copy, and the city has a copy. Harriman, we had a conference call this morning with Attorney Bolton, and we have, I think we're down to about one paragraph, and that their attorney's comments are being sent to Attorney Bolton, so the two attorneys can discuss that one paragraph. So that should be signed fairly soon. So this evening, we just talked about the contractor update. We're going to talk about the overall plan, the high-level schedule, and then any questions that you might have as we start phase one. So the contract update, as I just said, they've both been reviewed by City Corporation Counsel Steve Bolton. Had the blessing to sign the Harvey contract, and that's signed and distributed. And as soon as the two lawyers come to an agreement, and I have the final contract with a signature from Harriman and the okay from Attorney Bolton, I will sign that contract. And then we'll be good to go contractually. So once that happens, and actually we're pretty close, phase one will have officially commenced when both of them are under contract. Any questions regarding the contracts anybody might have? Heather?
Thank you. Is this contract for the entirety of the project?
No.
Just for phase one?
Phase one,
Okay.
correct?
The contract.
Well, actually,
No. The contract is for the entirety. It's a base contract. It's a two-part contract. When we get to a point when you folks make a decision to move forward, what you have signed or what Mr. Dowd signed tonight gets us through pre-construction. When we get to a point where we know where we are, whether you're going to renovate Elm Street or build a new middle school, and we produce what we call a guaranteed maximum price, we would then give you the third part of the contract, which would be what we call Exhibit A. And what it does is it rolls the dollar amount of the guaranteed maximum price into the contract. So you've got the first part that gets us through the pre-construction right up to the GMP. When a decision's made, the documents are done, we've bid it, we know what we're doing, we're getting ready for construction. We would then execute Exhibit A for final signature, and that authorizes us then to go out and make the awards for all the subcontractors and vendors and everybody that we would need.
So, yeah, I misspoke. It's for the whole contract, but the funding is only for Phase 1 at this point. So they're only authorized for the funding that we identified. For Phase 1, if there's funding left over from Phase 1, it will be carried over into Phase 2. All of the bonding funds for Phase 1 were reallocated from other projects that came in under budget. So we're good to go. There will be a multi-phase process, and we'll get into that with the schedule.
Great, thank you so much.
So the overall plan is as affected by many factors. The bonding schedule, Mr. Smith and myself, and I believe Mr. Donovan, we had meetings with the mayor and Treasurer Fredette, and went through the city's bonding constraints, for any lack of other word, and trying to phase in the other things that the school department's looking at, plus the fire, police. They are laying out the entire bonding schedule, which they'll be sharing with the Board of Aldermen soon. And the good thing is that the school project has priority, and we're like fitting it into the overall schedule. Then we require the phasing in that the first phase is, okay, basically which direction do we head? Do we renovate Elm Street, or do we build a new school? And we, at the end of Phase 1, will have a document delivered that will have recommendations, and then this committee will determine the path forward, which way we go. And it will be backed up by everything that's in that report. So we'll have justification for making the decision. Once Phase 1 is approved, Phase 1 is basically the data collection. They're going to start visiting the schools, talking to principals, talking to staff, looking at the physical structure, and all of that factors into that first phase report. Total funding for Phase 1, as I mentioned, is $300K. It was approved, the last $50K was approved by the Board of Aldermen last night. Phase 2 will be the design phase. Before we get to Phase 2, we're hoping that the Phase 1 report will be available in about 8-9 months, and we'll have the public hearings on the findings, and once this board makes a decision as to which way we're going to go, and we know what the funding is, then I will put in legislation for the bonding for the entire project through construction. And we will have that approved by the end of the year. Phase 2 hopefully will start on January of 2020. And that will be the design phase, which is approximately a year. You'll have a schedule soon that shows you where everything fits, and I told them to make it so that it's sort of rubber lines, because we tend to not have able to lock some of those in yet. But Phase 2 will be where they do the design package for whichever alternative we're going to be involved in. We will have a look at it, and other groups will have a look at it to determine the fine points of the design. Any questions on this part so far? Yes.
Alderman, thank you. Alderman Dowd, just for clarification, when you talk about the design phase, you're talking about not only building new or renovation of Elm Street, but also whatever has to be done to the other two middle schools?
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes.
Okay.
It's a middle school project, so part of the things I was just talking about, visiting schools, will be Fairgrounds and Pennachuck, to determine what we need to do to those schools in order to accommodate 800 students. we're sort of staying away at the moment away from the equity amongst the schools, because that's a sort of a question to be resolved later by educators. And that will have to be within reason, and the reason is cost. So, but it's far too soon to be making that decision yet. And next slide. So then phase 3 will be construction. Depends on which way we go, and the start date will also depend on weather and other factors, but it will probably be in the spring of 21, right? Spring of 21, we start moving earth. Okay, next slide. Bonding issues, as I just mentioned, that we have a very tight bonding schedule, and we want to ensure that the bonding schedule doesn't cause a strain on the tax rate. So we're trying to spread things out over a number of years. Also, the high school project, the building we're sitting in, and the other high school, that payoff is coming to an end in the next couple of years. So that's pretty significant, and that allows more room to keep. We try to keep the bonding schedule on an even keel, and as you pay down other things, you have room for other things to start. So that's where we're at. Let's see. I think I mentioned everything there, but the full bonding will be requested before the end of 2019. Next slide. Some additional information for you that, just so you're aware of everything we're finding out and going along. The city owns 2 adjacent pieces of property to the one that we have in the south quadrant that they're earmarked for the school. They're limited use as far as the city's concerned, so we're going to be looking at whether we can do an access road across that property to have 2 accesses to the property, usually, primarily for fire department, but if we can use it for other things, we may. But at least the city owns that land already. Members of the Board of Aldermen and Board of Ed, as people were available, were given a tour of the Broad Street Elementary School to see the distributed air system. That's the type of system we would use for either school, I believe, but especially a new school. Members are also given a tour of Nashua High North HIVAC systems and the penthouses. I took a few pictures. Some of them are in the presentation at the end, so you have some idea for those that weren't able to make the tour of the type of equipment we're talking about, because we'll probably have a penthouse if we build a new school, and it will be somewhat similar, not quite as big, but next. Okay, so we started, there's a project that Harriman can be very proud of, and Harvey as well. Were you involved in that? Yeah.
Yeah, we're proud of that one.
Just kidding, Carl. No, but that was a very successful school project, and we've had a lot of comments on it. Next slide. So that's the building committee. It was done in 2015. It seems like it was yesterday, and it's already 3 years out. So there's a team of people, part of the team that did the tour, and Mr. Smith that's the distributed air. Air comes in from up above, goes through that large opening. It's, when they call it distributed air, it's a much greater amount of air. It goes along the floor and then goes up. So it provides a lot more air with less carbon monoxide and other things that, because there's a greater volume of fresh air. Next. And that's where the air returns, up on the ceiling in all the rooms. So the warm air goes up, goes out through that system, goes back through and gets filtered. Next. Okay, this is one of the penthouses at Nashua, this building right here. When you come down and you look at the building and you see those big, look like tents up on top, There's 3 of them on the tops of the school. This is just one of them. They're all about the same size, and same amount of equipment, but there's a lot of equipment in that space, and we have someone that's stationed right in that space that maintains a lot of that equipment. And is one person for each school, or one person for both schools? Yeah, okay, for the high vac. And there must be a bazillion filters to change, and that would take them all day just by that. Next slide. More pictures of in the penthouse. They are quite long and have numbers of items in them. Next. Just so you get an idea of what it takes to heat a school like this, those are the 3 boilers. There's 3 boilers in each school, and that's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's an 8-foot ladder right next to that boiler, and it's heating an enormous amount of space. So I don't think all 3 are on at any one time.
Generally, one is on, when the temperature is around the freezing mark. So it dips down to single digits, we kick the second one on. The third one is, we just rotate the boilers every year. So they just get even use over a period of time.
So, and they have to be maintained, and we can't be without them. Okay, next slide. Just to get a better idea of how big the boilers are, that's the one boiler. And like I said, there's 3 in each of the high schools. There's an idea of some of the vast number of pumps involved in moving fluids around in the schools. Next. For those that are not familiar with a large gymnasium, in each of these high schools there's 3 gymnasiums. There's the large gymnasium, and you notice when there's a basketball game, there's only a few rows out. You see all the rows behind them. When we found it was going to be far too expensive to build auditoriums that could seat the entire student body, because you're talking about 1,800 students or more, in each school, they can pull those out way out onto the floor. When they do that, actually, they have a covering for the floor so they don't damage the hardwood floor, because that's pretty expensive. And they can seat the entire student body of each school in the gymnasium, the large gym. The middle gymnasium, I didn't get a picture of because I don't want to take pictures. The cheerleaders are in there practicing, and I didn't want to take pictures. So it's about half the size of the large gym, I would say, Sean. About. Has a softer floor, and it's used for a variety of different activities. And this is the small gym that's used primarily for wrestling and things where if you land on the floor, you can bounce off without getting hurt. That's a soft floor. It rolls up, actually, but it's in case you had to replace it. Next. Questions? No? Okay. So the next phase, or the next steps, if you will, once we have the final contract signed, is as the Harriman and Harvey and is going to be visiting the schools and collecting data, and that will be a large project just to collect the data, and then they will go back and look at the design options and costs of the renovation of Elm Street or building a new school. They will develop their final report, and they will be here every month for the Joint School Building Committee meeting, and will be giving us updates, especially if they find any surprises. We will be making decisions as we go on that element of it, and then probably around November, give or take a month, we'll be making the final decision as to which way we're going. Hopefully before November, I think, because I would prefer to have the entire bonding structure in place before the end of the year. Did you have a question, Alderman Lizzie Gold?
I did, thank you. You saw me turn my mic on. I just happened to think, as we were going through this, you indicated that the goal is to break ground spring 2021, which seems like a million years from now.
I know.
But I think for people who may be watching, who have students or will have students in the other middle schools, do you have any sense of how things will be happening at those schools once we start working at Elm Street, be it groundbreaking or starting renovation at the existing building? Will that happen kind of towards the tail end of whatever happens to Elm Street, or during the summer, or have we not gotten
I'm going to
that
give it a
far?
shot, and then I may see if Carl has
I
a
was going to
retort.
say, and I'm kind of looking beyond you at Carl.
But I'll give sort of the bonding issue, and he'll give the construction issue. Until we determine what needs to be done at the other two schools, we don't know how long it's going to take or how much it's going to cost, and what the design options will be. I would guess that some design issues will come out with because no matter what we do at renovation or new school on Elm Street, the other two schools would still be impacted. So we'll get an idea of what has to be done to those two schools and the cost. The phasing of when they actually, digging ground and starting actual physical construction will depend on a number of things, none the least of which is bonding and funding. So, as an example, and Carl will get more into this, if we start building the new school, it's not like it gets done in a week. It'll be some period of time, which you'll have a good idea of by the end of this phase. And the question is, when do we, hypothetically, let's say if we're moving, of course, it all depends, renovation or new school, but if we're going to a new school and we have to move students out of Elm Street to somewhere else, we can't move them all to the new school because there's like 1,200 kids at Elm Street. So the other two schools would have to be able to handle them. So it's all a phasing thing. Carl, you want to?
Yeah, the way I see this coming down, and Mark, you can jump in if I if I don't speak incorrectly. The documents, once we get all the information collected, and we have a fixed price on what we think it's going to take to do Elm Street, and we have a fixed price of what it's going to take to do Fairgrounds, and whatever you folks decide to do on Pennachuck and Fairgrounds Middle School. Those sets of documents would come out at one time, would be bid at one time, so there'd be one set of contracts. In terms of the start date, obviously, it'd be, if everything works out the way I would hope it would work out, we wouldn't have to get into winter conditions, putting foundations in the ground. Spring is the best time to start, and if we could put this out on the street in the dead of winter right after the holidays is the best time to bid a project. Mm-hmm. So if all that was to fall in place, we'd start once the snow is gone. Depending on what's happening, if from what I understand, you're looking to, from an equity standpoint, have about 800 students per school. You already have portables at Pennachuck. Yeah. So all of that, I see all three probably starting around the same time. I'd like to stay out of winter conditions to keep the cost down on all of these. We can hit all three sites at the same time. So in order to do, what I'm getting at is in order to create 800 students, we have to create classroom space, and we have to create classroom space to replace the portables. Right. And we got to get that done before we can even consider moving inside the school to do whatever may be required that comes out of the findings and the report and what your decisions are going forward. So I'd see probably all three of them starting relatively to the same time frame, spring, late spring. Because if it's a new school, shooting from the hip based on what we've been talking about, we're probably in a 24-month period, 2 years to get it done. Wouldn't take 2 years probably to get through both, but I want to hit the good seasons. And obviously, when you're working inside a school, as everyone here knows, once we get some swing space, we can then start moving our way through. But I can understand there's going to be those what we call summer crunches where once the students leave, we've got 6 or 8 weeks to try to get done as much as we can inside the school. So we would make the most use of the 2 summers that we would go through in both Pennachuck and Fairgrounds. So it might be a small lag lead, but it won't be, they'll be fairly close, in my opinion, getting them started.
Alderman Dowd, if I may, just a follow-up
follow-up.
comment. Thank you. I just think, again, 2021 sounds so far out, but if you're a parent or a 3rd or 4th grader, you're going to be impacted by all of this because it's just as your child's heading into middle school. And I just think it's important for families and the community in general to have a sense of how this is going to impact everyone, and that there is a plan, and that we know that we have to create space and do some things before we can put other students into the building and do what we need to do for the Elm Street space, be it renovation or new. So I just think for people to know that it's more than just Elm Street Spring 2021, that there's that bigger picture that's going to be happening, maybe not exactly at the same time, but within a few months, because all of these things need to kind of finish at the same time, so we end up with 800 students in each location.
That's
So,
correct.
thank you.
No, that's great. And keep in mind for the folks at home, much like we've renovated the other elementary schools, there will be what we call a site logistics plan that'll show where we're setting up, where the temporary fences are, how fire drills will still be happening in a school, where the kids will congregate on an emergency. All that will be vetted out with the fire department, police department, you folks. We will have a meeting with parents before the start of anything happening in any of the schools, so they have a clear understanding of what their child and they can expect if if they're dropping their kid off at school. So all of this is vetted out. Nothing's done in a vacuum. There are no surprises. That's down the road, but rest assured, we would use the same techniques that we used on all of the middle schools, which I think worked out well. Elementary schools, I think it all worked out well. Kept everybody safe. Keep construction segregated from the students and the staff. There'll be a plan in place that everybody will know and understand before we get started.
Thank you.
I'm going to give Mark a chance in a second, but
Sure.
one thing to be fair, neither one of both companies have been extensively in Elm Street, but neither one of the companies have spent any, or I don't think any time in Fairgrounds or Pennachuck. I'm not sure about Harvey, but
A little bit in Fairgrounds, yeah.
been to Fairgrounds?
Yeah.
So,
I have a question.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes, thank you. I am assuming that if the plan goes through that we build the new school, well, that school is under construction. Are we still going to be using Elm Street for the time being? And then say over the summer when the new school would be done, which would be 2 years from when we start, that they will just, over that summer, all the students that we had from Elm Street would transfer into the new facility. Now, that's assuming that we do build the new school.
yeah, that's a yes and a no. Not everyone from Elm Street is going to end up in the new school because you can't fit 1,200 kids in an 800 school. The idea is to reapportion the children across the 3 schools, and that will require that word that nobody wants to hear about, redistricting, and that is solely the Board of Education's responsibility. So good luck with that. But, and one other thing I wanted to point out is they haven't spent much time, and they're going to be visiting the 2 other schools, Pennachuck and Fairgrounds, to get an idea.
Yeah, well, I have a map that I have in my office here that was given to me about 10 years ago, or 10 or 11 years ago, that gave me the dimensions and the locations and all of the information on the current districts and schools that are being served by each one. So I'll be looking at that and following along as best I can. But thank you for the information.
Okay, and they're going to be visiting 2 schools. I was going to point out that Fairgrounds is sort of designed with middle school concept in that they have common areas. They're not quite using them the way that we saw in our presentations, but they have the area. Pennachuck doesn't. So as they're going through, it's going to be a while before we get an idea of what their concept is for those 2 schools. So I would not want to get too far ahead on that until they have an opportunity to go in and look at the schools and see what we need to do in both of those schools. And as we mentioned, you've got portables, and I think we said it was going to take at least probably 10 classrooms just to take the portables away. Now you're adding additional, because Pennachuck doesn't have as many students as even Fairgrounds, so there's more students that'll end up going to Pennachuck. And how much space we need is they at least have to get in there and see what's going on and how much space they have and all that. So I wouldn't get too far ahead on, what the design's gonna look like for either one of those elementary schools. We're just starting this process, so.
Well,
Mark, do you want to,
I don't
but
know.
we're not going to be using geothermal.
no, hang on, Mr. Mosier.
Sure. I was just going to add that we'll at our next meeting, probably with this group, we'll have our initial impressions of from all three. Actually, we're going to spend time going back through Elm Street as well, just get refamiliarized with any changes that have happened there. But so we'll come back at the next meeting here with sort of some photos and impressions of what we've seen at the others, and that starts to inform the dialogue regarding any proposed changes in those. And so it'll just be kind of that fact-finding portion of it right now. The only thing I was going to add to the previous conversation regarding the construction and phasing, as part of the report that we're putting together in this phase 1, you folks will all be well informed, even prior to the finishing of the report, of sort of the direction that we're intending and how it's going to be phased. So that's what the advantage of also of having the construction manager working directly with us right now is we'll work in concert to figure out the best way to have the least amount of impact, but also take advantage of when the best construction times are. And typically it's always cheaper to build it sooner rather than later. And so if we think of when we want to get those that work done to the other schools, in addition to thinking about the impacts of phasing in an occupied building, we also think about the value of the dollar and when to best take advantage of that too. So.
Alderman McLean?
Hi, thank you. I just want to clarify. So as far as Pennachuck is concerned, the trailers will go, and there will be new construction to Pennachuck in order to include those 10 classrooms, or are you looking to resize the inside of it?
The final decision remains yours, or the city's, in terms of how you want to move forward. I think the goal, what I understood, would be to eliminate those temporary classrooms that have been there on a permanent basis. So, yes, I mean, I think if that's the direction that you want to head.
Yeah, one of the very first tasks that we have is to actually understand how the space is being used in all of the 3 schools and the degree to which we would recommend changes to how that space is being used. And one of the important things is also to consider the space in the portables and how to recapture that in the school itself. So I think that's all part of that initial discovery phase and coming back and reporting that. And at some point, we'll make recommendations to you folks and get and solicit your opinion on those.
Thank you.
Any additional questions concerning what you've heard tonight or from either one of the contractors? So we will be heading off quickly on this project, and so the only next step is to get the contract signed with Harriman, which is probably a day or 2 away, and then there will be meetings in the schools where they go and go through the schools and start collecting all this data. And as I said, every month they'll be back here giving us an update. And Sean and I will be interfacing with them between that to see what's going on and if we need additional meetings. Hopefully not, because especially the Board of Education has more meetings than they need already. It seems like lately our board too. 5 nights this week, so 4 nights. So, all right. So comments by members of the public. I don't see anybody that wants to speak. Did you have anything else, Mr. Mosier?
No, my last comment was that I sincerely hope that we're not going to be looking at geothermal to heat the new school.
No. I mean, everything will be on the table, but the only place that might consider it, and it's too early to even get into that, would be if we build a new school, and the heating options will be part of the process.
Yes, I'm sure, because used the geothermal last time we had that was went over like a lead balloon.
Yeah, well, it's a long time ago. Comments by members of the committee? Anything else that they want to bring up? Alderman Jettie?
The plan to have 3 schools of equal population, is that a done deal? Or I'm just sitting here thinking that if during our studies we find that we're going to build a new school, and whether it would be if it's determined that building a 1,200 student school is cheaper than adding on to Fairgrounds and Pennachuck, whether that's still an option, or has the decision to have 3 equal schools already been made for whatever reasons?
It's pretty much been made, and I think solidified by the Board of Education. Elm Street was never designed to be a middle school. It doesn't meet any of the criteria for a middle school. I have a front page of the document because it's about this thick. So it was never conducive to a middle school environment. Even if we were going to renovate Elm Street, we will be changing some of the physical characteristics of the school somehow. And there's a whole bunch of issues with having 1,200 students there. Seems like none the least of which lately is kids getting hit crossing the street. But the idea is we want to balance the 3 schools districts and 800 students in each one, so that the population is more evenly divided. And there are a number of factors that go into it. If we had to build a 1,200 student school in South Nashua, I'm not sure about the lot size, if they would handle that, but also you would be doing a lot more busing than we want to plan for. You'd be taking kids from quite a distance to get there, because there's 3 different zones, if you will. So yes, it's pretty much decided that we're going to make the 3 schools evenly populated for fairness to the kids that are going to be getting educated there. Yeah. Alderman Melissa Golian?
Yeah, if I could just make a comment too. I think, when you follow what's been going on with middle schools, it's the environment you provide for students and the spaces and the opportunities to gather and form relationships among themselves and with staff. And I think if we were talking about building a middle school for 12,000 students, or 1,200 students, we would then be getting into discussions about how do we make that building feel smaller and cozier and help kids feel more connected. So, which would, I think, present its own issues related to design and the expense that goes along with it. So although we're looking at balancing the number of students, I think all of the presentations we had, and obviously Harriman very well because they're sitting here with us this evening, talked about that whole environment, the physical environment, and how it promotes not only academic growth, but social emotional growth and stability, which I think all of us are aware of being something that's important as students transition through and during that middle school timeframe. So again, I think if we were looking at 1,200 students, we'd almost be talking about building little pods or units or whatever, or houses, so kids had that feeling of connectedness, and I think that would just make it more expensive.
So one of the more pressing things is all of the places you go and look at middle school design, they don't like to have big schools. It's a transition period for young adults going from elementary school to high school, and there's a huge change. And in my 10 years on the Board of Education, the biggest problems we always had was with kids in the middle school. We lose them for various reasons, which are too long to get into tonight, but they need the smaller environment and the educational structure to transition from an elementary level to the high school level. So when they go to this school or the South School, you know, it's not as big a shock from a number of different aspects. And Mark, do you want to chime in on, since you guys don't know about middle school design?
I think so much has been said that's right on. I think the issue that we sometimes call it or term it as schools within a school, when we're talking about a school of as large as 1,000 or more, to actually create two separate schools almost that have some shared resources, but it does potentially create issues with duplication of some resources in order to really truly create independent schools within the school. And indeed, for the middle school environment, it is that idea that we want to create these smaller social groupings, because that's really where the students make connections not only with their peers, but also really meaningful relationships with the adults, which is one of the really, really important aspects of fostering healthy middle school spaces.
Any other follow-up, Alderman Jenny, or you're all set?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is 800 a magic number of some kind?
Mrs. Raymond, do you want to address I was just going to say that the student population today and the student population as we grow, and we've got reams of data from the Board of Education, if you'd like to spend time looking at them, on how many students we'll have year to year for the next God knows how many years. That's the number, 800 students. I also had a discussion with the contractors when we were talking about this. We're going to design 3 schools for 800 students. That doesn't mean they couldn't go to 825 or 850 if we had to, but our projections don't indicate that. It's going to go the other way a little bit. So 800 seems to be the maximum number, because we're pretty much grown out in Nashua. And there's not a lot of land to develop, so I don't think we need any more than 800 in each school.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, so when you say 800, you mean there's approximately 2,400 middle school students that are projected to.
there's almost 2,400 now. I don't have, actually I probably do have it buried in all this paper somewhere, what the student population is today. Sean, do you remember what it is off the top of your head? Yeah.
It's around 2,400, a little bit less.
Yeah, Mr. Raymond, you?
Yeah, excuse me, it's a little loud. It's a little over, not quite 1,100 at Elm Street, and then it's like 600 at Pennachuck and about 700 at Fairgrounds, give or take 10 to 20 students in each one. And we have about 3,000 in the high school. So.
And the other thing that I've sort of been bombarded with by some people in city government is that they would like to draw the students, they would like to have the 3 middle schools be attractive enough to draw back some of the students that are going to the alternative schools. And the other thing is, if one of those ever closed, then we have to be able to absorb them into that middle school structure. So all of that's part of this first phase, so. Hang on. Did you have something else, Mrs. Raymond?
Sorry. No, I was just going to comment a lot of what everybody else said about the middle school experience and just the idea of going from a, say, 400-person elementary school and then an 800-person middle school and then like a 1,600-person high school. It kind of doubles at each level. And it's nice to have a community that is planful in that way. Instead of, right now, kids at Pennachuck will go from a 400-person, on average, elementary school to 600 to middle school, and then be in a school with, 1,500 students in high school. And that's a bigger, jarring experience, I think, than we would prefer our kids to have.
Also, these two high schools were designed to be schools within schools. Not quite as we planned when we built them, but they still have like 4 different schools within each high school. If you, well, you were on the tour. I don't think we went by any of the offices though. Each wing is sort of by itself. There's some flexibility about students going to other wings for classes, but the idea was to try and keep kids in like one wing, their own sort of age group, class size. And we found that's a lot harder to do than said on a piece of paper, but, and I don't know exactly how that's working out today, but I do know that I've been told by the principals that it is still schools within school. So there's like 4 schools within each one of these high schools. And if you had a bigger school in middle school, you'd have to do that. And then you sort of lose the kids going from the small school to the double, triple the size of the school, and now they're like lost. And that's the age period when kids get lost, and we don't want them to get lost. We want them to feel included and learn how to grow and develop before they come here. Okay, anything else? There a motion? Alderman Muzzigoli made a motion to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 7:55.